Measures, and I'm here hosting VM's monthly webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Technical SEO in a Semantic Search World, and will be presented by our very special guest, Ethan Hayes. Ethan is head of digital products for Eero, the 2014 Global B2B Agency of the Year. Ethan has 15 years of experience in technology marketing, focusing on web strategy, search engine optimization, social media, and web analytics. Prior to joining Eero, Ethan worked at Uptake Networks, recently acquired by Groupon, where he was Director of Revenue and was Principal SEO Engineer at leading SEO firm Stone Temple Consulting, working with the Art of SEO author Eric Enge. In both in-house and agency roles, Ethan has worked with clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies such as Procter & Gamble, SAP, United Healthcare, to Silicon Valley technology startups. I'm super excited for this presentation. We actually got a recommendation from our CEO who saw Ethan present this at the Digital Summit in Denver, so we're looking forward to hearing this. But before we get started and I hand over the presentation, I have a couple things to note. Today's webinar will be available for viewing by tomorrow, and we will send everyone an email with a link so you can watch the video and also the slides as well. Also, after the presentation, we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So if you take a peek at your webinar interface, you'll actually see a question applet where you can send anything you'd like me to ask Ethan at the end of his presentation. Alternatively, you can ask us questions via Twitter using the hashtag VMWebinar. Any questions we don't get to, we'll be sure to try and answer via email. Also, if you have any technical problems, I find the best way is just to sign off and then attempt to reconnect. Usually that fixes it. So with my notes complete, I will hand it off to our presenter, Ethan Hayes.
Thanks, Quinn. I appreciate it. Very excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation. As Quinn mentioned, I've been doing technology marketing for a while now, for about 15 years. And also, as Quinn mentioned, I've been doing search engine optimization for 12 going on 13 of those years. It's always been, even though my role now with Gyro is much more broad in scope, SEO is where I got my start, and it's always where my heart is. And I just find it a really valuable lens to use to look at online business as a whole. So very excited to be here. The title of my presentation, of course, is Technical SEO in a Semantic Search World. I've been thinking about this a lot over the past several months. And if you've been in SEO for some time, the world of SEO has seen more big substantive changes in the past 3 years than at any time in the previous 10 years, that I've been in the industry. With the Panda algorithm, the Penguin algorithm, and all of these big changes happening, I think that some of us, and myself included, have not necessarily spent the time to take a step back and look at a broader view of ourselves professionally and SEO as an industry, and really ask ourselves, are we doing all the things that we need to do to position our clients for success in this new semantic search world? It's a lot easier to stick with what we know and talk about all the title tags and meta descriptions that we optimized than it is to think about a completely different paradigm for search. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. And so just as a way to get started, let's talk about the open web and the state of the open web specifically. And the state of the open web it's a mess. The web is a heaving mass of unstructured data. It grows exponentially. It's completely unsupervised. People are throwing new technologies in there all the time. Websites are born. Websites die. Nobody cleans up after themselves. So the web's a mess. It's a beautiful mess, but it's still a mess. And technical SEO is really just the best set of tools that we have to elevate our sites out of that mess. And the fact of the matter is that whereas 10 years ago, if you were doing really solid technical SEO, you were guaranteed top 3 rankings as a result. If you look back maybe 6 or 7 years and you were doing really solid technical SEO, you were still going to get some really good first page rankings as a result of your efforts. Now, technical SEO is probably going to get you somewhere in the top 100. It is just the minimum amount of work that you can do to be in the game. And the game is changing, and it's getting more complicated all the time. So SEO in 2014, we can look at things like the Search Metrics Ranking Factors study, where they're looking at the impact and the correlation of all of these individual factors on whether or not URLs are ranking well. You can look at the Moz Ranking Factors study, where they're looking at the difference between page-level ranking signals and domain-level ranking signals, and are those ranking signals keyword independent or keyword dependent? And as long as you're doing that, might as well get ready to deal with our friends the penguin and the panda. And as long as we're at it, why don't we just go ahead and take away all of your organic search keyword data? And all of this is to say, we as SEOs have a lot on our plates. I think that in this reality, in the search engine marketing landscape that we're in right now, I think that a lot of us feel like we're just doggy paddling furiously trying to keep our heads above water, and Google keeps crashing waves over the top of our heads, and we're just doggy paddling and trying to make sure that we can get the next breath. But because that is the case, I think that we may not be taking that time, as I mentioned earlier, to take a step back and really evaluate not just the waves that are crashing over our heads, but the ocean that we're swimming in. And semantic search is that ocean. It is the fundamental reality of organic search at Google. It is their primary search ranking algorithm. You see Bing making steps in this direction, right? Today they just announced conversational search, which is a version of semantic search. They've also have their Cortana personal assistant sort of as a rival to Siri that uses some semantic search technologies. So this is the reality that we all operate in. But I don't think that we've really necessarily processed what semantic search means for us. If we asked, if we took a poll of all the people on the call right now, I think we would probably get a lot of very similar responses to the question, what is semantic search? People would correctly say things like, well, semantic search is about understanding the meaning of the query and delivering results based on an understanding of the context in which the query was made. Semantic search is about things, not strings. And in semantic search, those things are called entities, and entities are organized into an ontology, and entities can have multiple properties based on their type, and entities have relationships to other entities. And even at a level deeper than that, that semantic search is really based on some really advanced technology, specifically in the form of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing. There's a lot going on just to make semantic search work. But again, despite knowing all of these things academically, I don't think they've necessarily filtered through to the extent that we've identified specific tactical strategies to address semantic search with technical SEO. We may be fine talking about it in the abstract, but it's way easier for us to default back to doing the things that we know and feel really confident about, like optimizing title tags and optimizing meta descriptions, than it is opening ourselves up to a completely new domain of knowledge like natural language processing or deep learning or something along those lines. And so, part of my goal here is to make an argument that that has to change for us as individual practitioners and for us as an industry. And so we know that semantic search changes things, but the question is how. And I really think that it doesn't change things that much for us, provided that we were doing search engine optimization correctly to begin with, right? Which is a big caveat. But I think we need to think of semantic search and the work that's necessary to integrate semantic search into our businesses and our organizations very much in the same way that we had to integrate traditional SEO into our businesses and processes 5, 6, 7 years ago. Some of the people on the call have most certainly sat in meetings where you have to make a business case for implementing correctly optimized title tags, right? And the engineers are fighting you tooth and nail because they don't want to do extra work. You won't have to have that specific fight again, but you will have to have a fight like it because semantic search carries with it a new set of requirements. But the good news is that the fundamentals are still important. It's not like just because semantic search is the new reality, we have to throw away everything that we've been learning for the past 15 years. This represents an evolution. And because the fundamentals are so important, I'm going to address the rest of this presentation talking about the fundamental units of on-page SEO, which are information architecture, code, and content. And my goal today is to walk you through some specific exercises that will give you actual actionable steps, projects that you can do, analysis that you can perform on behalf of your own sites or your own clients immediately after getting off the call. So let's dive in. Start off with information architecture. Depth of information architecture. There's nothing specific to semantic search about talking about the depth of information architecture. It is, however, one of the things that I most frequently see the most sites getting the most wrong. Depth of information architecture is so critical because it is one of the most influential factors in determining how link authority is distributed through your site. And I'm going to walk you through sort of a quick example here, a straw man that shows a hypothetical website that has, a home page and then pages at 1, 2, and 3 clicks away from that home page. And the straw man is essentially that the home page has a page authority of 100, that every page on the site links to 100 other pages, and that pages lose approximately 15% of their authority in the process of linking out. And that's been referred to as a dampening factor or a decay factor. That little 15% is a link off to Matt Cutt's blog where he actually talks about this. And I'm going to walk you through this as an example just because I think it's powerful, it's illustrative, and you don't necessarily have to be an SEO to get it. So here's the home page through 3 clicks away, and here's your site. Start off with your home page an authority of 100. You multiply it times the dampening factor, and then you divide that remaining authority out across 100 outgoing links, right? This is the exact kind of math that they showed in the original PageRank patent. So it's not going to be exactly accurate, but it's directionally accurate. At 1 click away from the home page, you've already dropped from your home page at an authority of 100 to a page 1 click away with an authority of 0.85. Apply the dampening factor, split it across 100 links. Same thing with that page that's 2 clicks away from the home page. By the time you get to 3 clicks away from the home page, you have a page with an authority of 0.000061. That means that a page 3 clicks away from the home page is about 1.6 million times less authoritative than the home page. Again, this is not precisely accurate, but it's meant to be a directional guide It still gives you a real sense of the problem, though. And as I mentioned, you don't have to be an SEO to understand this. I've presented this slide to executives, and in the context that I'm about to show you, it becomes a very powerful teaching tool. It becomes an argument for prioritizing a project. So let's talk about analyzing the depth of your IA. To everybody on the call, I'm sure that Screaming Frog is a tool that many of you own. If you have not purchased a license, I recommend you do so. It'll be the best $150 you spend all year. And so I say crawl your site using Screaming Frog 2.4 and above. They actually added a sort of a similar, I've been doing this analysis with spreadsheets for years. Screaming Frog just added this as a feature to versions 2.4 and later, and you can actually see, that little arrow points to site structure, and it will show a running total of how many URLs are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to n clicks away from the homepage. However, I don't recommend using the sort of pre-built report within Screaming Frog when you're out there trying to make a business case for getting a project prioritized. And I'll show you why here in a second. Essentially, Screaming Frog will stop counting at 10 clicks away from the home page, and everything that it gets that is 10 or more clicks away from the home page is just one line item that is 10 plus. I'm going to show you the analysis as I do it and why I think it's more effective. So you export the data, open it in a CSV, select all your data. As you can see, the address here is for this is a crawl of Time Inc. This is an actual crawl of a website that we did. Time Inc., of course, is the biggest media company in the world. It's the parent that owns Time Magazine and Sports Illustrated and People and 90 plus other titles. Insert a pivot table, drag status code and content to your filter section. Drag address to sum of values, and drag level to row labels. And as a result, what you see is in column A, that's the number of clicks away from the home page. 0, of course, is your home page. And in column B, you have a count of address. You set your status code to 200. Obviously, you only want to be looking at URLs that are returning HTTP status code 200, and set your content type to text pages, right? You could equally do this for images or PDFs, but of course we're interested primarily in text pages. This piece of analysis, as I said, the Screaming Frog will give you a version of this out of the box, but I think that it hides the problem, right? In this particular case, Time Inc. Just through a sort of an oversight and through lack of understanding, they had an information architecture that had pages 144 clicks away from the home page. If you combine this spreadsheet, the data from this spreadsheet, with an explanation like this, it becomes a really powerful argument. It becomes part of your business case. I actually presented this exact analysis to the CEO of Time Inc. About 2 weeks ago. He is, as you would imagine, not an SEO, but he understands math, and he understood that this is, I was not pointing out a slight deficiency, I was pointing out a show-stopping bug that needed to be fixed. Just 2 days ago, we got hired by Time Inc., so I speak from experience. This kind of analysis and this kind of presentation of information works. Moving on to code. Specifically schema.org. We know that schema.org is important. The Search Metrics came out with a study earlier this spring where they showed that about 36% of the tens of thousands of Google search pages that they analyzed were showing listings that contain schema.org markup. So that's a pretty respectable showing, right? About a third of the results are showing schema.org. The thing is, you have to appreciate that in the context that it's wildly overrepresentative of the actual number of websites that have implemented schema.org. Only 0.3%, 0.3 of 1% of websites have implemented schema.org. So the question is, what's the disconnect? If we know that Google thinks it's important and is showcasing, is featuring websites that have schema.org implemented in far greater proportion than there are actually websites that have schema.org implemented, why aren't more people doing it? And I think there's a couple of ways to answer that. The first one is that it's hard work. It requires developers to learn to code differently. And developers are like the rest of us. They're overworked, they're under deadline, and telling them, oh, and here's one more thing that you have to do, especially if it's something that's completely unfamiliar to them, that's not necessarily going to be music to their ears. And the second thing is that schema.org is intimidating. If that screenshot that you see on the right side of the page, that is the full type hierarchy of schema.org. This is a tiny percentage. There are over 700 data types in the hierarchy. The screenshot that you see there is literally maybe a tenth of the size of the actual page. The page is just enormously long. And so you've got all of these different data types that can have all of these different properties, and it becomes very intimidating very quickly. So the question is, how do you get around those roadblocks and actually start making some substantive progress? So I'm going to argue that we should all be getting our heads around schema.org right now and taking steps to implement at least some schema.org right now. First off, give your developers some background. Developers are developers because they like understanding how things are built and why things work the way they do, so give them some technical documentation. I provide a link here, this white paper called What is Schema.org? It's from LRMI. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's, I think, 12, 13 pages or so, but it is a great overview of what schema.org is, how it's architected, why it's important. It's a great resource to give them some background information. Second, break the task into manageable chunks. 700 plus data types, you're not going to be able to solve for all of them at one time. Figure out which data types are most applicable to the greatest number of your pages and solve for those first, right? You can take, let's say if you had 10 different page templates that collectively comprise all of the pages on your website, and you figured that page template number 3 only represents 5% of your total pages, but that 5% of your total pages actually gets 25% of your organic search visits, that becomes a pretty compelling starting point. So you can use analytics to help you prioritize the task. And third, make sure that you're giving your engineers some concrete examples to code to. Again, handing them that schema.org type hierarchy and saying, hey, sort it out yourselves, guys. Best of luck with that. It's going to go nowhere fast. So give them an example of a correctly coded HTML version of your most common page template or your most important page template, and just tell them to make all the rest of the pages of that type look like that one. A great way to get started with this is using Google's Structured Data Markup Helper. This is a great tool. It's sort of a simplified version of schema.org because, as you can see, it only essentially gives you 10 different options of data types that you can choose from. It's sort of the most commonly utilized ones like local businesses, events, movies, etc. So necessarily a much smaller subset of the full 700 types, but it's a great place to get started. I've just used here an example from a product review website called the Wirecutter. So I select products, I input the URL, and start tagging your stuff. It just shows a little side-by-side panel where you get a view of the web page you're tagging on the left-hand side. And all you have to do is literally highlight stuff with your mouse and then apply the correct labels. You keep on doing that until you don't have any more stuff to label. and then click Create HTML. Then you get to create your source code. So you click Finish, you click Download, and as you can see there, HTML source with microdata markup, and then I've got that red box around some of the actual schema.org markup is sort of in the code itself. This is enormously helpful to developers, but let me tell you what you don't want to do with it. The advanced SEO power move is not to take this piece of marked up HTML and attach it to an email and shoot it to your developer and say, hey guys, here's the example, make the other pages look like this one. No. The advanced SEO power move is go and sit down with your developers. Sit down with them, look them in the eye, and walk them through every line of added code. Make sure you have a chance to discuss it with them. They have a chance to ask you questions. As we, in my experience, the very favorite question of any engineer is why. So be prepared to answer questions. And once you get done doing that, you have one more constituency, one more group of stakeholders, and that is your QA team. I think that the relationship between QA and SEO is one of the most neglected but most beneficial relationships that you can have with your development team. QA engineers are the guys who are responsible for making sure that the stuff that you've just specified to the engineers actually gets built the way that you want to build it. So do the same thing. Show them the code, sit down, ask answer any questions that they have, and then help them to create the test cases that they're going to use to validate that the implementation is correct. QA engineers, in my experience, are really open and appreciative of that kind of help. You're helping them broaden their career. It's something that they can put on their resumes, right? Not only, I create test cases for all of the on-page SEO elements that are tracked across my site, but I have experience with advanced SEO technologies like schema.org implementation. That's something that helps them build their career, and it helps you get what you want along the way. It's a win-win. This is an example. So as I mentioned, there's 700 data types. That's a lot. Google Structured Data Markup Helper gives you access to 10 of them. But then there's sort of a larger question, which is, what are the other data types that apply to everything else on my site? You can use this free tool. It's called Alchemy API. It is fantastic. You go there, you enter in a URL from your site. Maybe it's one of your most frequent page templates, and what it will do is it does automated entity extraction in the same way that Google does entity extraction and Bing does entity extraction. It goes through and it strips out all the stuff that it can identify, and it lists it. As you can see in that list of entities, the first one is Logitech, and it's identified its primary type as a company and a subtype software developer. Down to the bottom, Windows is identified as an operating system. Apple is a company that is also a brand, an operating system developer, a processor manufacturer, programming language developer, etc. So this can really help you start to get your head around what those data types that are most frequently used throughout your site are, and as a result, how you're going to want to prioritize implementation. And finally, content. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Panda algorithm is it is integrated into Google's primary search algorithm now. So it is run. It's not run in a batch at a specific time like Penguin is. It's integrated into the primary search algorithm, which means that you always have to be thinking about your website, your client's website, through the lens of not just how good is my content, but also at the most macro level, how is my content distributed? Do I have large amounts of really big pages? Do I have large amounts of very thin pages? How is my content distributed? So this analysis also uses Screaming Frog. As a side note, if you do a lot of really deep content inventory, kind of analysis, you might want to look into another tool called URL Profiler, which it's very similar to Screaming Frog, but it's much more specific to the needs of content inventory. But at any rate, I did this with Screaming Frog data. You can equally do it with URL Profiler. Go to your crawl data, insert a pivot table, take content and status to filter, just like you did before, take address to values, but then take word count to your row labels. And as you can see there, in column A and column B, you've got column A row labels, column B count of addresses. Set your content filter to text and HTML. Set status code to 200, just like you did before. The thing is, in this particular format, the data that you see aren't terribly helpful. I've highlighted row number 6, and it shows you that Screaming Frog has determined that there is exactly one URL that has 333 words on it. There is one URL that has 346 words on it, and so on and so forth. It's good to know, but it's just not terribly actionable. So the way to make this data more useful is to group your data. Right-click on any row in your pivot table, select Group, and then you'll see a little pop-up box like I showed here, and it's starting at 0 and going to 527.76. That's just the biggest piece of content in the crawl. The by field simply tells what number of words to group by. I chose 200 here, but that's arbitrary, right? You could go, if you wanted to go more granular, you could choose to group by 100, or less granular, choose to group by 300, whatever works for you. What you get as a result is a nice bundling of your content at the most macro level. As you can see here, Time Inc. has 103 text URLs that resolve HTTP status code 200, but have between 0 and 199 words on them. That's a really easy way to get your head around where you're going to have to prioritize work. And so you can go back to your crawl data, take your word count column, apply a filter of less than 200, and there is your actual list of all of the 200, or in this case 103 URLs that have less than 200 words on them, and that is a simple prioritized list for you to go and start creating projects around. So in summary, accelerating into the term, semantic search is not going anywhere. It is going to accelerate the pace of change in organic search, and we have to embrace that, right? We can't keep our heads in the sand. We can't keep focusing on the character length of title tags forever. There are bigger problems to solve in the world of SEO, and a lot of them relate to semantic search. So, we as individuals, as professionals, we as an industry have to start getting our heads around how we're going to adapt to the new reality of semantic search and how we're going to actually drive adoption within our organizations. And that's, I've worked on a lot of websites over the years. I've worked with a lot of great SEOs. I've worked with a lot of not so great SEOs. And I've seen some sites that have fantastic technical SEO and some sites that have horrible. And I found that the distinction between a site with great SEO and a site with just sort of good SEO is rarely how much the SEO in charge knows. It's much more an issue of how good you are at communicating why it is that a problem exists and how it is that you should address it and why it's important. Good technical SEO has a very fundamental element of good communication as a requirement, and we should never forget that as professionals. Become good at building business cases. Become good at educating C-suite, right? As I showed earlier with that information architecture example, you don't have to be an SEO to understand some of the fundamental principles and understand why they're important. And finally, it's all of our collective tasks to integrate SEO into our product manager and software developer workflows. And that's all I have for you guys. I hope this was helpful. This was a sure treat being here with Quinn, and thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. We've got a couple questions, and if anyone else has some questions to ask Ethan, please go ahead and write those to us or tweet us with the hashtag VMWebinar. So we'll start out with a question from Alex. He asks, we offer a service. Can I use the product's data markup highlighter for my services or not?
I mean, I think that depends on the kind of service. There may, in fact, be a much more specific data type that applies to the kind of service that they're offering as opposed to a product. I would encourage them, put it this way, we know that full type hierarchy is 700 types long. You're going to have to dig in there and figure out what is the most specifically relevant to your use case. I think you can actually use the structured data markup helper as sort of as training wheels. You can mark up your services page as though it were a products page, and then simply go in with the correct, with the implementation of schema.org as a product in your pages. You can then go and swap out the actual data type to be service specific, because again, not knowing exactly what his business is like, if he has the intuition that his service is not properly a product, Google probably feels the same way. There's probably a more specific way to label it accurately, and accuracy is the name of the game.
Right. Yeah, and it looks like he said it's marketing services and graphic design. So I think, like you said, it just has to come down to the specific case use of what he's going for. Let's see. We've got another question from Dalton. He asks, what are the common developer questions you run into when implementing schema?
Why? the favorite question of all developers, why? It's like, well, guys, I need you to learn this new kind of markup. It's called schema.org. Why? So you have to, again, and that's why I linked out to that background white paper, what is schema.org from LRMI. It gives them a bit more sort of academic grounding in what it is and why it's important. But you will have to be able to speak intelligently about why it's important for your business, and doing so in the context of, hey, search has fundamentally changed. The old information retrieval model of that search engines followed has been fundamentally altered. It is not about keywords and co-occurrence and frequency and things like that. It's about understanding the world as comprised of entities that are organized into ontologies, and ontologies imply relationships between those entities. So being able to give them a bigger picture and saying, hey guys, this is about positioning our business for success, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years from now. It's not about handling some tactical thing like optimizing alt tags that was important 8 years ago.
Great. Another question from Greg. Have you tested a site before and after doing structured data markup? If so, were there increases in ranking in all of the cases?
So I think that is a very difficult question to answer, simply because, as we all know, running an accurate SEO test is almost, running an accurate SEO test that gives you really clean data is pretty close to impossible. There are too many confounding factors, which is to say, are you, for the URLs that had schema.org applied, how are you doing pre-post? Are the variances that you see pre and post directly attributable to schema.org? Were there variations in how frequently the words that those URLs ranked for were queried? Et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's hard to answer in the in the abstract, but I'll say that in several cases where I have implemented schema.org on behalf of clients, we track the rankings and more specifically the click-through rates on those listings, and listings with schema.org markup that is visual in its nature, right? Sort of like stars and number of reviews and those kinds of things. Those tend to get much greater click-through rates. In other cases, essentially hidden schema.org it has been harder for us to triangulate and say, yes, there's a direct cause and effect relationship. This URL used to be ranking at number 8. We implemented schema.org and now it's ranking at number 6 or something like that.
Great, and then we have a couple questions focusing on page authority of blogs. So I'll read these both so you can kind of get a background of the question here. So how do sites focusing on categorized article content maintain page authority on their article pages? And then the second question is, as far as page authority, how would you organize blog posts that they still have some authority and hold more SEO juice? So can you speak to kind of like content, blogs, articles, and the page authority that kind of might get diffused as you go further into the site?
Oh yeah, sure. So this is it's a great question, and actually one of the most frequent offenders of excessively deep site architectures is blogs, because blogs were built to they all essentially function in the same way out of the box, which is newer posts go on top and they push older posts further down. The more older posts you have, the more paginated archive pages you have. So it's very frequent with as sort of an out-of-the-box implementation of a blogging platform. You can have site architectures that are hundreds of clicks deep. That is a very common problem. So there are different ways to tackle this, but fundamentally what you have to do is figure out a way to surface more content within fewer clicks. That can be as simple as doing a date-based index page. Essentially, you're trying to change the archiving structure. So one solution that I've used with some clients is essentially you have on the home page of the blog one link to archive, and you have on that page, January through December, and underneath underneath each month, you've got all of the years that you have posts for. You click into any of those years, and you get, in this, let's just make this up and say, I click on 2010, and I see all of the posts that were published in January 2010. So if you count those clicks, homepage, archive, 2010, blog post, you've just elevated a 4-year-old blog post to within 4 clicks of the homepage. So that kind of simple change, I've done that with other clients. I used to do work for a massive sort of popular culture blog network. They get 100-something million uniques a month, and we actually got them an incremental boost of about 10% just by changing how they archived blog posts. So it sounds silly. It is incredibly effective.
Well, 10% can be a lot for that big of a site, so I'm sure
exactly.
They're pretty happy. I have one more question that we have time for, and I think this just goes back to how the shift from technical SEO to semantic and kind of how all of search is evolving. So how do we communicate to clients and to developers and anyone we're working with that natural language and authority is more important than keywords nowadays?
Oh boy, that's another great question.
That might be a whole webinar.
Yeah, I think so. It's tough. So we are to a certain extent. In some cases, we can be victims of our own success in that we have gone through years and years and years of trying to get the people who write our content to think about keywords, to write less like journalists with clever puns as headlines, and just be more straightforward. Use keywords, use nouns and verbs, that kind of stuff. And The downside of that is that you can get people who are pretty stuck in their ways and essentially say, oh, well, why did I even have to learn this keyword research stuff if now you're saying it's not important? Well, it is still important, right? The fundamentals of good on-page SEO are still the same. Having a unique descriptive title tag is still a best practice. And using that primary keyword a couple of times on your page, still a best practice. But you don't need to go overboard. Overall, the thing that I've found with this change to semantic search is that it actually does give writers more leeway to speak in their own voice, and they love that. So you tell them, hey guys, hopefully everybody on this call abandoned keyword density as a metric a decade ago, but you can tell your writers, don't worry about a magical use of a certain number of keywords a certain number of times. Write the way that is compelling to your audience. You're a subject matter expert. Talk like a subject matter expert, and you'll be rewarded accordingly.
Great. Well, thank you, Ethan. I think we learned a lot, and I still have some more questions that we'll try to follow up with after the webinar. But please, everyone, join us. We do this every month, and we're going to have a webinar next month, September 18th, where Larry Kim, he's the founder of WordStream, he will be presenting a webinar on paid content promotion. So nowadays, you can put a little bit money into something that you created, and it will go a lot further than you may think. But there are strategic ways to do it. So we're going to have that September 18th, and we will have registration open for that soon. Also, a couple people have asked us if we will be sending slides, and yes, we will be sending slides as well as a recording of the webinar, so you can recap and kind of learn a little bit more deeper into technical SEO. So thank you so much, Ethan. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great Thursday.